Level 1, the recruit. You're 19 years old and you're standing on a set of painted footprints outside a brick barracks in Cape May, New Jersey at 11 o'clock at night, and a company commander is 3 inches from your face asking why you thought this was a good idea. You didn't have a good answer ready. You have a duffel bag, a haircut you didn't choose, and a stomach full of a bus station sandwich that's about to become a serious mistake. 8 weeks of training start in the next 4 minutes, though nobody has told you that yet. You just know that the yelling hasn't stopped since you stepped off the bus. You learn to fold a t-shirt to exact government specification. You learn that a rack, a locker, and a uniform can all be wrong in ways you didn't know were possible, and that close enough is a phrase that does not exist here. You learn to fall out for muster in under 90 seconds. You learn general orders you'll recite for years without thinking about the words anymore, the way you don't think about your own name. You learn to swim in full uniform, boots and all, because a Coast Guard that can't swim is a joke nobody's allowed to make twice. The physical part breaks you down slowly and rebuilds you on a schedule nobody consulted you about. Push-ups you couldn't do in week 1, you're doing by the dozen in week 5. Your feet stop hurting because they've stopped having feelings at all. You learn damage control, how to plug a hole in a hull with wood and your own body weight if it comes to that, how to fight a fire in a steel compartment with the smoke rolling low and the heat pressing your ears. You learn seamanship, knots that have names older than the country, lines that will take your fingers off if you stand in the wrong bight at the wrong moment. Week 6, they let you fire a weapon for the first time. Your hands are steadier than you expected. Something in you settles into this in a way it never settled into anything before. Week 7 is pass and review. Uniforms pressed sharp enough to cut, and your family drives 4 hours to stand in bleachers and watch you march. Your mother cries. You don't understand yet what she's crying about. You will. You graduate as Seaman Recruit, an E1, the lowest rank the service has, and it still feels like the biggest thing you've ever done in your life. You get your orders, a ship you've never seen, in a city you've never lived in, 3,000 miles from the bedroom you grew up in. You board a bus with a sea bag over your shoulder and no idea what a cutter actually is. Level 2, the Seaman. Your first ship is a 270-foot medium endurance cutter, and the first thing you learn is that everything on it is smaller than you pictured and somehow contains more machinery than seems physically possible. A boatswain's made first class with forearms like cable assigns you to deck division. You chip paint. You chip more paint. You learn that a ship is never actually finished being painted, that rust is a war you fight forever and never win outright, only hold at bay. You stand your first watch at sea, seasick in a way that makes you question every decision that led here, gripping a lifeline while the horizon tilts at angles that shouldn't be legal. An older seaman hands you a cracker and tells you it passes. It does, eventually. You learn to read a wake, to heave a line, to handle a mooring the way it's supposed to be handled, instead of the way that gets you yelled at. You qualify as a lookout, standing 2 hours in the wind calling out contacts, learning that the ocean is never actually empty if you're paying attention. 6 months in, you're underway for a fisheries patrol off the coast, and you board your first vessel. You climb down a Jacob's ladder onto a heaving deck with an experienced boarding officer ahead of you, and you check catch logs and safety equipment on a boat that smells like diesel and old fish. And you understand for the first time that this job is not abstract. Real people's livelihoods, real safety, actual consequences, sitting there right on a deck that won't hold still. You take the exam for Petty Officer 3rd Class. You study on watch, in your rack with a red lens flashlight after taps, in whatever corner of the ship isn't occupied. You pass. The advancement comes through. You sew a single chevron and a rating badge onto your sleeve, an eagle you chose because you wanted the deck side of the house, and you are no longer the lowest rank on the ship. Somebody else is. Level 3, the Petty Officer 3rd Class. You're 22 now, rated as a boatswain's mate, and you're standing actual responsibility for the first time. You run a small boat crew, a 45-foot response boat, twin engines, a coxswain's seat you're training to sit in a crew that looks to you now the way you used to look at people 3 years senior to you. The call comes in on a Saturday afternoon, a small craft taking on water 2 miles offshore, 3 people aboard, one of them a child. You're underway in 6 minutes. The seas are running 4 to 6 feet and building. You take spray over the bow the entire transit, soaked through before you're halfway there. When you arrive, the boat is low in the water, listing, the family standing in the cockpit with life jackets half buckled, and fear on their faces that you recognize because you felt something close to it yourself, just never with someone else's safety riding on your next decision. You get a dewatering pump aboard. You get the family transferred to your boat one at a time, the child first, handed across water that won't stop moving. You tow the disabled vessel back to the marina as the sun goes down, and nobody says much on the ride in because there isn't much that needs saying. 2 weeks later, a letter arrives at the family's request, thanking the crew by name. Your commanding officer reads part of it out loud at quarters. You stand there not knowing where to look. You start qualifying junior members now. You teach a seaman apprentice how to throw a heaving line properly, how to read the water before a boat launch, the same way someone taught you. Teaching it changes how well you understand it. You make Petty Officer Second Class at 24, 2 chevrons now. The rating badge feels heavier in a way that has nothing to do with the thread. Level 4, the Petty Officer Second Class. You're 26, and orders send you to an aids to navigation team on the coast. Small unit, tight crew, buoys and day beacons and range lights that mariners depend on without ever thinking about who maintains them. You learn a whole different discipline: crane operations, mooring chain inspection, sinker weights, the mathematics of how a buoy actually stays where the chart says it should be in a current that never stops trying to move it. You cross-train into search and rescue planning, learning to run drift calculations, factoring current and wind and leeway into a search pattern that has to account for the fact that a person in cold water only has so much time. You learn the phrase golden hour and understand it's not a metaphor. You're part of a case involving a capsized kayaker at dusk, and the search grid you helped calculate puts the boat crew within 400 yards of a man clinging to an upturned hull in water that would have taken him under in another 20 minutes. He goes home to his kids that night. You go back to the station and can't sleep, replaying it, not because it went wrong, but because you understand now exactly how close wrong was standing. You're selected as a boarding officer, qualified now to lead law enforcement boardings independently. You conduct dozens of them, most of them routine, safety equipment checks and documentation, a few of them not routine at all. You find a vessel running without proper life-saving equipment for the number of passengers aboard, and you have the uncomfortable conversation of telling a boat full of people their trip is over until it's fixed. Some of them argue. You hold the line anyway. You learn that being liked and doing the job correctly are 2 different goals, and only one of them is actually yours to worry about. You make Petty Officer First Class at 28, 3 chevrons. You've been in 8 years. Command starts handing you responsibilities that used to belong only to the chiefs.
Level 5, the Petty Officer First Class. You're 30, and you're effectively running a work center now in everything but title. Junior members report to you before they report to the chief. You write performance evaluations that affect someone else's career. You're the one called at 0300 when equipment fails and a case is running and someone needs a decision made before the officer of the day can even get out of bed. You deploy for a counter-narcotics patrol aboard a cutter in the Eastern Pacific, weeks at sea, a boarding team standing ready around the clock. The intelligence tip comes in on a go-fast vessel, and your team launches in the small boat under a night with no moon, running an intercept in open water at speed that makes conversation impossible. You come alongside a vessel loaded with contraband and a crew that doesn't want to stop. Nobody gets hurt. 1,400 kilos come off that boat and into evidence bags, and you write the case report until 2 in the morning because paperwork doesn't care what time your body thinks it is. You're selected to attend the Chief Petty Officer Academy preparation, a signal from command that they think you're close. You mentor 2 third classes and a seaman through their own advancement exams, sitting with them after hours going over rates-specific questions you memorized a decade ago and haven't needed since. One of them makes rank on the first try. You feel that win almost as much as your own. The Chiefs Board convenes. You wait for the list the way you waited for exam results at 19. Except now there's a family depending on the answer, a mortgage, a career that either turns a corner here or doesn't. Your name is on the list. Level 6, the Chief Petty Officer. You're 34, and the initiation to the Chief's Mess is unlike anything the service does anywhere else. A season-long process, older chiefs call a season for a reason, humbling in ways you don't fully explain to people outside the community. You come out the other side and pin on an anchor, and something in how people look at you changes permanently. You're no longer just a technical expert. You're the person E6 and below come to when something is actually wrong, and the person officers come to when they need the truth about their own division instead of the polished version. The Chief's Mess operates on a code you learn fast. Chiefs handle chiefs' business behind closed doors and present a unified front outside them. You've never belonged to anything with rules that firm, and you understand within a month why the rules exist. You're the technical authority on your rate now, the one junior members are told to find when the manual doesn't cover the situation in front of them, because the manual never quite covers the situation in front of them. A junior petty officer under you makes a serious mistake during a boarding, a safety violation that could have gotten someone hurt. You don't write him off. You sit him down, walk him through exactly what happened and why, and make sure he never makes that mistake again, instead of just making sure he feels bad about making it once. Years later, he'll tell people you're the reason he stayed in. You deploy again, this time as boarding officer's supervisor for an entire patrol, responsible for training and readiness across 3 boarding teams. 9 years since Cape May. The recruit who couldn't fold a t-shirt correctly is unrecognizable in the mirror now, and not because of the anchor on the collar.
Level 7, the Senior Chief Petty Officer. You're 39 and you pin on a star above the anchor. Senior enlisted advisor for an entire cutter's crew now, the direct line between the enlisted deck plate and the commanding officer. When morale is cracking somewhere in the crew, you're the one who finds out before it becomes a problem instead of after. When a young member's marriage is falling apart 3,000 miles from home and it's affecting his watch standing, you're the one who sits with him in the mess deck at midnight and helps him figure out what to do next. You're the one the captain calls into the wardroom to ask what the crew actually thinks about a decision before it gets made. Because officers rotate through commands every few years, and senior chiefs are often the institutional memory that keeps a unit from repeating its own old mistakes. You've stood every rank from E1 to E8 personally, which means nobody on that ship can tell you a story about the job you haven't already lived some version of yourself. A major storm response tests everything you've built over 2 decades. Search and rescue cases stack up faster than crews can be launched. You're coordinating logistics from the cutter, prioritizing cases by survivability window, sending boat crews back out on 4 hours of sleep because the calls keep coming and there's no one else to send. 41 people come home because of decisions made in that stretch of days. You don't sleep properly for a week. You do it again tomorrow. Level 8, the Master Chief Petty Officer. You're 44 and you've reached the top enlisted pay grade the service has. E9, Master Chief, Command Senior Enlisted Leader for an entire unit now. The anchor sits differently on your collar than it did a decade ago. Heavier in the way that only comes from having earned every single rank between here and Seaman Recruit the hard way. You sit on advancement boards now, deciding who gets to become chief, the way a board once decided about you, and you remember exactly how it felt to wait for that list, so you take the responsibility of that chair seriously in a way that surprises the junior board members. You represent the enlisted community at change of command ceremonies, at memorial services for members lost in the line of duty, standing in dress uniform, saying words that never get easier to say, no matter how many times you've said them. You've trained 3 generations of Coast Guardsmen at this point, some of whom now outrank you in the sense that they've moved to the officer track and hold commissions, and you salute them without a trace of resentment because you understand something about the service that took you 2 decades to fully understand. Rank structure exists to organize responsibility, not to measure a person's worth to the mission.
Level 9, the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard. You're 49, and you've been selected for the single most senior enlisted position the entire service has, Principal Advisor to the Commandant on all matters affecting the enlisted workforce, 40,000 active duty members, whose concerns now run, in some form, through you. You never imagined this seat existed for someone like you when you were standing on painted footprints at Cape May getting yelled at for a haircut you didn't choose. You travel to units across the country and around the world, sitting on mess decks and in boat station break rooms, listening to 19-year-olds who remind you uncomfortably and completely of yourself. You testify in front of Congress about enlisted quality of life, about pay, about housing, about the things that actually determine whether the service keeps good people or loses them to easier lives on the outside. You carry 30 years of deck-plate experience into rooms where policy gets written by people who've never chipped paint on a cutter or run a search pattern for a missing kayaker at dusk. You retire at the top of the enlisted structure, 4 years in the position, 34 years total in uniform. There's a ceremony, a change of watch, a relief who will carry the role forward the way you did. Someone reads your service record aloud, and it takes 11 minutes. Your mother, older now, is in the audience, the way she was in the bleachers 30 years earlier. And this time, you understand exactly what she was crying about back then. And somewhere right now, a 19-year-old is standing on a set of painted footprints outside a brick barracks in Cape May, New Jersey at 11 o'clock at night with a duffel bag and a haircut they didn't choose, and no idea that 8 weeks are about to start reshaping them completely. They don't know yet what an anchor on a collar will someday mean. They don't know the names of the ranks between where they're standing and the top of the whole structure. They'll learn. Most will serve their contract and move on with something real to carry for the rest of their lives. A few will make chief. Fewer still will make master chief. And once in a great while, one of them will end up standing in front of Congress representing every deck-plate sailor the service has, remembering exactly what it felt like to be 19 and terrified on a patch of painted concrete, wondering if they'd made a mistake.